Sign the damn papers, Quentin. I'm not drowning with you. Quentin Cross stood motionless, his silhouette framed by the panoramic window overlooking a city that no longer bowed to him. He looked at the woman he had worshipped for 5 years, her face twisted in a mask of disdain, her chest heaving in her designer silk dress. "Is that all I am to you, Callista?" Quentin asked, his voice terrifyingly calm. "A balance sheet?" "You were a titan," she spat, throwing the divorce settlement onto the coffee table. "Now? You're a liability. Sawyer is waiting downstairs." The rain in Seattle didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. Quentin Cross sat on the edge of the plush velvet sofa in what was arguably the most enviable penthouse in the city. But the air inside was stale, heavy with the scent of expensive perfume and dying ambition. 2 days ago, Cross Innovations had officially filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The headlines were brutal. "Tech prodigy loses everything," read the Financial Times. "From billionaire to bust," sneered the gossip columns. The public reveled in the fall of a titan. They loved the ascent, but they adored the crash. Quentin rubbed his temples. The headache had been a constant companion for 3 weeks. The public narrative was simple. Risky investments, a failed merger with a biotech firm, and a market correction had wiped him out. To the outside world, Quentin Cross was liquidating assets just to keep the lights on. The elevator doors chimed, sliding open with a smooth whoosh. Callista Drake walked in. She was stunning, a vision of icy perfection in a crimson trench coat that cost more than most people's cars. Her heels clicked rhythmically on the marble floor. A countdown. She didn't say hello. She didn't ask how the meetings with the creditors went. She walked straight to the wet bar and poured herself a stiff vodka. "Brielle called," Callista said, her back to him. Brielle Mercer was their family attorney, a shark in a skirt who had managed their prenup. "And?" Quentin asked, though he knew the answer. Callista turned, her eyes sweeping over him with a look that wasn't hate. It was worse. It was indifference. "She says we can save the Hamptons house if we transfer the deed to my name immediately, before the banks freeze the secondary accounts." "We're not keeping the Hamptons house, Callista," Quentin said, his voice weary. "We're selling it to pay the severance packages for the staff. I'm not leaving my employees with nothing." Callista slammed the glass down. "Your employees? What about your wife? You expect me to move into some condo? You expect me to clip coupons because you decided to play God with the market and lost?" "We have enough to survive," Quentin said, standing up and walking toward her. He reached out, attempting to touch her arm, but she flinched away as if he were contagious. "We can rebuild. I have ideas, Callista. I just need time. I need a partner." "I didn't sign up for a project, Quentin. I signed up for a lifestyle," she hissed. "I stuck by you when you worked 80-hour weeks. I played the role of the trophy wife at your endless galas. I did my job. You failed at yours." The cruelty of her words hung in the air. It wasn't just the money. It was the exposure. Callista cared deeply about how she was perceived. Being the wife of a failure was a social death sentence in her circle. "Is that it then?" Quentin asked, his eyes hardening. 5 years. The vows, the memories, all contingent on the stock price? "Don't be naive," Callista scoffed, pulling her phone out. She typed a quick message. "Sawyer Knight has been asking about me. He's opening 3 new resorts in Bali next month. He knows how to treat a woman. He doesn't ask her to sacrifice. He provides." Sawyer Knight. The name tasted like bile. Sawyer was Quentin's antithesis. Old money, flashy, arrogant, and morally bankrupt. He had been circling Callista for years, like a vulture waiting for the lion to be wounded. "You're leaving me for Sawyer?" Quentin laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "He's a shark, Cal. He'll chew you up." "At least he's a rich shark," she retorted. Brielle is drawing up the papers. I want a clean break. I'm taking the jewelry, the car, and whatever liquid cash is left in the joint account. You can keep your debt and your pride. She walked past him, the scent of her Chanel lingering like a ghost. Quentin looked out the window at the gray city. He felt a strange sensation in his chest. It wasn't heartbreak. It was the snapping of a tether. He was free, though the cost of freedom was everything he thought he loved. The mediation room was sterile, smelling of lemon polish and ruthlessness. Brielle Mercer sat at the head of the mahogany table, her face professionally blank. Callista sat opposite Quentin, checking her watch every 30 seconds. The terms are straightforward, Brielle said, sliding the document across the table. Callista waives spousal support in exchange for the immediate liquidation of the vehicle fleet and the transfer of the remaining bond assets. Quentin, you retain full liability for the Cross Innovations debt, but you keep the intellectual property rights to the defunct projects, which are currently valued at zero. Valued at zero, Callista echoed, a smirk playing on her lips. Generous of me to let you keep your scraps. Quentin picked up the document. He read it carefully. He wasn't looking for loopholes to save money. He was looking for absolute severance. He wanted no ties. If he signed this, she could never come back. She could never claim a cent of what he was about to build. One condition, Quentin said, looking up. Callista rolled her eyes. Oh God, what now? I'm not giving you the dog, Quentin. I already sold it. Quentin ignored the jab. I want a clause, a no-contest clause. Once this is signed, neither party can sue for future earnings, regardless of change in circumstance. Total financial separation, permanently. Brielle paused, her pen hovering. She looked at Quentin, her eyes narrowing slightly. She was a smart lawyer. She sensed something off. A desperate man usually begged for help, not permanent separation. But Callista was impatient. Fine, Callista snapped. Add it. I don't want his future earnings. I don't want his debt. Just let me sign. Brielle typed the clause into her laptop, printed the addendum, and slid it over. Callista signed with a flourish. Quentin signed with a steady hand. It's done, Brielle said, stamping the notary seal. Callista stood up immediately. She didn't look at Quentin. She walked to the door, where a man was waiting in the hallway. Sawyer Knight leaned against the doorframe, wearing a suit that cost more than the average annual salary. He grinned, a predatory flash of white teeth. Tough break, Cross, Sawyer said, though his tone was dripping with triumph. He draped an arm around Callista's waist, pulling her close. Don't worry, I'll take care of her. She's got expensive taste, but I can afford it. She's all yours, Sawyer, Quentin said, gathering his folder. Be careful. She depreciates quickly when the attention stops. You're pathetic, Callista spat, leaning into Sawyer. Enjoy the homeless shelter. They walked away, their laughter echoing down the corridor. Quentin waited until they were gone. He stood up and shook Brielle's hand. Thank you, Brielle. Send the bill to the usual address. Quentin, Brielle said, her voice dropping to a whisper. I have to ask. You gave up the bonds. You gave up the cars. You barely fought. Why? Quentin adjusted his coat. For the first time in months, the weight on his shoulders was gone. He looked at Brielle, and a small, dangerous smile touched his lips. Because, Brielle, he said softly, sometimes you have to burn down the forest to let the new trees grow. Callista wanted the fruit. She didn't want to tend the garden. He walked out of the law firm and into the street. He didn't hail a cab. He walked toward the subway. He was moving into a small studio apartment in the industrial district. It was a far cry from the penthouse, but it had one thing the penthouse didn't. Potential. The studio apartment was barely 500 square feet. The paint was peeling, and the radiator hissed like an angry cat. But on the solitary wooden table in the center of the room, sat 3 high-powered servers and a secure satellite phone. Quentin sat in a folding chair, eating takeout noodles. The luxury of his past life felt like a fever dream. He preferred this. The hunger. The focus. A knock on the metal door reverberated through the room. 3 distinct taps, a pause, then 2 more. Quentin unlocked the deadbolt. Dane Fox stepped inside, shaking rain off a heavy leather jacket. Dane was Quentin's oldest friend and the former COO of Cross Innovations. While the world thought Dane had been fired months ago for incompetence, the truth was far more complex. "Did she sign?" Dane asked, dropping a duffel bag on the floor. "She signed," Quentin said, taking another bite of noodles. "Total separation. The no contest clause is watertight." Dane let out a low whistle and cracked a beer he had pulled from his pocket. "Cold, but necessary. How is she?" "She's with Sawyer," Quentin said. "She thinks I'm destitute." "Good," Dane said, pulling a laptop out of the duffel bag. He booted it up, the screen glowing with complex lines of code and banking interfaces. Because if she knew the truth, she'd have clawed your eyes out to get to that signature line. Dane turned the screen toward Quentin. "The Project Aegis patent was approved this morning," Dane said, a grin spreading across his face. "And the offshore holding company, Vanguard Holdings, which, thanks to your brilliant structuring, has 0 legal connection to the bankruptcy of Cross Innovations, just received the initial licensing fee from the Defense Department." Quentin looked at the numbers. Current balance: $108,450,000. The bankruptcy was real, in a sense. Cross Innovations, the consumer-facing tech company, had failed. It had been bloated, inefficient, and dragged down by the lifestyle Callista demanded. But Quentin had seen the crash coming a year ago. He had quietly pivoted. He had poured his personal genius and his remaining private capital into a shell company, developing a revolutionary quantum encryption algorithm. He had separated the assets legally, placing them in a trust that Cross Innovations creditors couldn't touch because it wasn't technically an asset of the company. It was intellectual property owned by Vanguard, an entity Callista didn't even know existed. "So," Dane said, leaning back, "you are officially a ghost. To the world, you are Quentin Cross, the failure who lives in a studio apartment. In reality, you are the CEO of the most valuable shadow tech firm on the West Coast." "Nobody can know, Dane," Quentin said sharply. "Not yet." "Why?" Dane asked. "You have the money. You could buy the penthouse back tomorrow. You could rub Sawyer Knight's face in the dirt." "No." Quentin stood up, walking to the small, grimy window. "I spent 5 years being loved for my wallet. I spent 5 years wondering if anyone actually gave a damn about me. Callista proved my worst fears." He turned back to Dane. "I'm going to live like this for a while. I want to know what it feels like to be invisible. I want to build Vanguard without the galas, without the press, without the leeches. And if I ever let someone into my life again, they're going to fall in love with the man in the studio apartment, not the man with $100 million. Dane nodded slowly. "A test." "A filter," Quentin corrected. "But we have work to do. Sawyer Knight is planning to acquire the old Cross Innovations warehouse to turn it into a nightclub. He wants to dance on my grave. He doesn't know that warehouse sits on top of the main fiber optic junction for the city," Dane mused. "If we buy it through the shell company, we control the data flow for his entire district," Quentin finished. "Let him have his fun, Dane. Let Callista have her Bali trips. When I rise, I'm not just coming back for money. I'm coming back for respect." Quentin looked at the screen, at the 9 figures glowing in green. "Now," Quentin said, "help me move this server. I have a shift at the library in the morning." "The library?" Dane laughed. "You have $100 million and you're working at a library?" "I need the internet access," Quentin smiled, a genuine smile this time. "And the coffee is free. Besides, I met someone there." "Oh?" Dane raised an eyebrow. Her name is Odette, Quentin said, his voice softening. She thinks I'm studying for a GED. She brought me a sandwich yesterday because she thought I couldn't afford lunch. She gave you a sandwich? It was the best sandwich I've ever tasted, Quentin said, because she didn't expect a diamond necklace in return. The Seattle Public Library was Quentin Cross's new sanctuary. It smelled of old paper, stale coffee, and the quiet aspiration of people trying to learn something. It was the antithesis of the sterile, air-conditioned opulence he had abandoned. His job there, a volunteer position organizing the massive archives, was perfect camouflage. It gave him access to high-speed fiber optics, crucial for Vanguard's quantum computations, and the quiet anonymity he craved. But the real reason he came was Odette Hale. Odette worked at the Library Cafe, a small, bustling corner serving overpriced lattes to students. She was everything Callista was not: unpolished, fiercely intelligent, and utterly devoid of pretense. She wore thick-rimmed glasses, had a scatter of freckles across the bridge of her nose, and often had a smear of latte foam on her denim apron. She didn't notice Quentin's worn-out cashmere sweater, only the deep lines of concentration around his eyes. She thought he was a struggling immigrant, or a man trying to reinvent himself after prison. She hadn't yet decided which, but either way, she respected the quiet fight she saw in him. He was sitting at the back table one Tuesday, staring at a complex wireframe diagram for Project Aegis, disguised in a generic binder labeled Advanced Math for GED, when she slid a coffee across the table. "On the house," she said, her voice low and melodic. "You look like you're trying to solve the Riemann hypothesis, Quentin. Take a break." He looked up, pulling himself out of the billion-dollar matrix. "It's a stubborn equation," he managed, smiling. It felt easier to smile now. With Callista, every smile had to be perfect, measured, a performance for the cameras. With Odette, it was just muscle memory returning. "You're always here," she observed, leaning against the table, wiping it down with a practiced motion. "Tell me, what makes you work so hard? Is it the money? The degree?" He hesitated, the lie about the GED feeling heavy on his tongue. He had to remind himself. The lie wasn't about deceiving her. It was about protecting the real him. The real him, the one who craved simple human connection. "It's not the money," he said truthfully, leaning closer. "It's about having total control over something, about building something that matters, regardless of the noise. And honestly, the fear of failure is a powerful motivator." Odette nodded, tucking a stray strand of auburn hair behind her ear. "The fear of falling backward. I know that well. My parents were musicians, artists. They chased the passion, but the bills always won. I got stuck paying their debts for a long time. Now, I'm studying finance. The irony is not lost on me." Quentin felt a pang of connection, a sudden, deep respect that he hadn't felt for anyone in years. Callista had never known struggle. Her biggest worry was which yacht club to join. "Finance is a good choice," Quentin said, the genuine analyst coming out. "It's not about the spreadsheets, Odette. It's about leveraging constraints. It's about building structures that sustain, not ones that crumble under the first wave." She grinned, a genuine, luminous expression. "That sounds profound. You should put that on a bumper sticker." "Leverage constraints. Is that what you learned in your past life?" Quentin felt his breath hitch. "Past life?" "Before the GED," she clarified, noticing his tension. "You talk like an executive who fell on hard times. Not a fresh start guy. You look like you've signed million-dollar contracts, not homework." Quentin relaxed, marveling at her perception. She saw the truth, but interpreted it through the lens of a noble struggle, not a colossal fraud. "You're right," he admitted, choosing his words carefully. "I ran a business. I failed spectacularly. I lost everything that mattered, including my wife. Now I'm starting over, trying to figure out what mattering actually means. Well, Odette said, pushing the coffee towards him. Starting over is just learning how to walk again. It's slower, but the ground feels solid. Their conversations became a ritual. They spoke about literature, history, and the quiet dignity of work. Odette shared her dream of opening a non-profit consulting firm for struggling artists. Quentin, stripped of his expensive veneer, was forced to use his true currency, his mind. He coached her through her finance homework, explaining complex market dynamics in simple, relatable terms. He was brilliant, she thought, a diamond that had been temporarily buried in the dirt. Meanwhile, 1,000 miles away, in the sun-drenched hedonism of Bali, Callista Drake was living her ideal life. Her Instagram feed was a relentless carousel of opulent dining, infinity pools, and Sawyer Knight's self-satisfied smile. She commented to her friends on a post featuring a colossal diamond cuff. "Finally, someone who understands my value." She saw the news articles about Quentin's bankruptcy being finalized. She felt a smug sense of relief. She had escaped the burning ship just in time. She never once spared a thought for the man she had married, only the societal embarrassment he had almost caused her. But for Quentin, the true value was in a shared laugh over a bad takeout pizza in his tiny studio, or the electric touch of Odette's hand when she celebrated solving a difficult problem. He was sleeping better than he had in years. The money was a distant hum in the servers, a potential he was actively ignoring. He was learning that authenticity was the one currency that could not be leveraged, structured, or lost in a market crash. It simply was. He had a moment of pure clarity a few weeks later. Odette was visiting his studio to work on a presentation, completely unfazed by the peeling paint and the whirring, mysterious servers tucked away behind a curtain. As she worked, she absent-mindedly reached out and fixed the collar of his shirt, which was crooked. It was a gesture of unstudied intimacy and care. In that small, quiet moment, Quentin realized Callista had never once performed a simple act of service for him. Her love had always been about receiving, never giving. He hadn't just lost a wife, he had gained his freedom, and, potentially, his soulmate. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. The world was about to change again, but this time he was building it for himself, with an authentic foundation. He just had to keep the $100 million secret buried a little longer. The headquarters of Vanguard Holdings was a 6-foot-wide utility closet within Quentin's studio apartment. Behind the shower curtain, the 3 rack-mounted servers hummed, guarded by military-grade encryption and powered by the repurposed fiber line that ran directly to the library archive. A small act of tech genius Quentin found amusing. Dane Fox was in the studio, having flown in discreetly via a private charter to a remote regional airport, a luxury paid for by Vanguard, not the bankrupt Quentin. He was wearing a nondescript suit and drinking the bitter, industrial-strength coffee Quentin now favored. "The acquisition is finalized," Dane announced, closing his laptop with a decisive snap. "Shell Company Delta 7 bought the old Cross Innovations warehouse property at auction, paid $40 million cash." Quentin nodded, sipping his coffee. Sawyer's face must be purple. "He was furious," Dane confirmed, a satisfied smirk on his face. "He had the winning bid, but our financing came through 20 minutes before his, structured through a blind trust in the Cayman Islands. He lost the property, which he planned to turn into the nightclub, a monument to your professional demise." "A monument to his own short-sightedness, more like," Quentin corrected. "He was focused on the superstructure. He missed the foundation." The value of the warehouse wasn't the dilapidated building itself. It was the massive network junction box underneath, the nerve center for the high-speed data that powered the entire industrial district. By owning the land, Vanguard now had leverage over every major competitor in the area, including several of Sawyer Knight's minor real estate and hospitality ventures. The best part is he doesn't know who bought it, Dane said. The papers list an anonymous holding company specializing in infrastructure asset management. He thinks it's some pension fund or rival developer. He still believes Quentin Cross is scraping change for bus fare. Quentin leaned back in his folding chair, the steel digging into his spine. This felt better than sitting on any velvet sofa. This was strategy, pure and cold. Good. Now, the real work. The DoD contract is conditional. They need to see a stable, scalable testing environment for Project Aegis within the next 6 months. Project Aegis was the reason for all of this. The quantum encryption that promised unbreachable security for military communications. It was Quentin's true legacy, developed in secret, divorced from the superficial pursuits of Cross Innovations. The $100 million was just the seed money. The actual valuation of Vanguard once Aegis went live would be in the billions. Dane pointed to the curtain hiding the servers. Those 3 racks are maxed out, Q. We need a dedicated facility, secure from everything. EMP, seismic, and, certainly, prying eyes. We're running hot on the clock. I know, Quentin murmured. But we can't surface yet. The moment I open a legitimate office, the press will descend, and Callista's lawyer, Betrayal, will start sniffing around. I need Vanguard to achieve critical mass before I reveal myself. The financial separation has to be beyond reproach. Speaking of sniffing, Dane said, lowering his voice, Brielle Mercer called me yesterday. Quentin tensed. What did she want? The official line was that she was checking in on my post-termination consulting, but she was asking about the Cross Innovations IP. She specifically asked if the company ever had any projects related to advanced cryptography or offshore intellectual property licensing. Quentin's jaw tightened. She's sharp. She must have seen the no contest clause and realized I only insisted on it if I knew I was about to get rich. She's looking for proof I knew about the assets before the divorce was finalized. She won't find anything, Dane assured him. The incorporation of Vanguard predates the bankruptcy filing by 6 months, but the transfer of capital and the patent filing happened after the divorce was initiated. Plus, the IP was never owned by Cross Innovations. It was developed by a private research unit. Keep the records pristine, Quentin ordered. If Callista can prove I concealed assets, that clause is void, and she'll take half of everything. I lost 5 years of my life to that relationship. I'm not losing my life's work. Dane paused, looking at Quentin. This isn't just about the money anymore, is it, Q? This is about Callista's authenticity. It's about the principle, Quentin countered, but Dane's insight hit a nerve. She wanted to punish the failure. I want her to realize she discarded a diamond while she was busy admiring paste. But more importantly, I need to protect Odette. If Callista or Sawyer get a whiff of this new life, they'll ruin it. They'll ruin her with the toxicity of their world. He looked at the small, hand-painted ceramic mug Odette had brought him yesterday, sitting beside his high-powered satellite phone. The contrast was stark. The life he lived now was real. The life he was concealing was the foundation for that reality. I need to find a space that can be secure, but also looks entirely innocuous, Quentin mused, pacing the small room. Somewhere I can install the new hardware, somewhere high security, low profile. I have an idea, Dane said, tapping his fingers on the table. You know the old fire station annex downtown? It's been empty for a decade. Looks like a crumbling concrete box. But it's got 3 underground levels, perfect for shielding. And it's directly connected to the city's power grid bypass. And it's right around the corner from the library. Quentin considered it. A decommissioned municipal building. Secure, overlooked, and utterly unremarkable. Perfect, Quentin said, a plan solidifying in his mind. Use Vanguard funds to purchase it immediately. Call it the Seattle Historical Archive Annex. And Dane, make sure I have the keys before Sawyer Knight even hears the name. The Shadow Empire was ready for its foundation. The confrontation was as inevitable as gravity. It happened on a sunny Saturday afternoon, the kind of day that mocked Quentin's gritty new life. Quentin and Odette were at a local farmer's market near the industrial district. He was carrying 2 worn cloth bags, a stark contrast to the branded shopping bags he used to carry for Callista. They were laughing over the absurdity of $8 organic kale when a shiny black Mercedes G-Wagon pulled up sharply near the curb, its tinted windows offering a view into a world Quentin had successfully forgotten. Callista Drake stepped out first, wearing massive designer sunglasses and a dress that looked freshly flown in from Milan. She looked radiant, expensive, and completely out of place among the produce stands and working-class families. Following her was Sawyer Knight, smug and physically imposing, his arm immediately snaking around her waist. They were heading toward a high-end sushi bar across the street, but Callista stopped dead when she saw Quentin. Her hand flew up to shield her eyes, not from the sun, but from the sight. "Quentin?" Her voice was laced with disbelief and a barely disguised, chilling contempt. Quentin took a deep breath, placing his hand gently on the small of Odette's back. Odette looked from the glamorous woman to Quentin, a flicker of understanding and protective defiance in her eyes. "Callista," Quentin said, his voice level. "Sawyer, enjoying the local color?" Sawyer's grin was wide and cruel. "Trying to. Didn't realize they let the riffraff in here now, Callista. Look, he's even carrying his own bags. My, how the mighty have fallen." Callista stepped closer, her nose wrinkled in distaste. Her eyes swept over Quentin's simple jeans and comfortable jacket, and then fixed on Odette. "Who is this, Quentin? Your new secretary? Or are you slumming it with the local volunteers now?" Her tone was dismissive, treating Odette like a prop in Quentin's disastrous new life. Odette stepped forward, placing herself deliberately between Callista and Quentin. She didn't raise her voice, but her simple integrity cut through Callista's artifice. "I'm Odette Hale," she said, her head held high. "And I'm not anyone's employee, I'm a friend. You must be Callista. Quentin has told me a little bit about your departure." Callista's eyes narrowed, offended by Odette's casual defiance. "A departure is one way to put it. I prefer escape." "Look at him, Odette. Look at the fingerprint of poverty all over him. He's finished. He blew everything on a pipe dream and debt." She gestured around at the market. "Is this your idea of romance, Quentin? Buying bruised apples?" Sawyer chuckled, joining the verbal assault. "You know, Cross, I tried to track down that dusty old warehouse of yours. Figured I'd turn it into a shelter for failed CEOs, just to give you a place to stay. But some faceless corporation swooped in and bought it for a ridiculous amount. Probably some Chinese investors. Bad luck, huh?" Quentin's muscles tensed. He wanted to look at Sawyer, to tell him that the faceless corporation was standing right in front of him, and that the ridiculous amount was now under his control. But the secret was too valuable. He needed to protect Vanguard. He needed to protect Odette. Odette sensed his internal struggle, the way his knuckles were white where he gripped the bag handle. She stepped in again, her gaze completely focused on Callista. "He talks about his dreams now," Odette said softly, contrasting her measured tone with Callista's shrillness. "He talks about building things that matter, not just things that shine. We talk about resilience. It's a very different kind of richness, Callista, one that can't be bought and certainly can't be divorced away." The sheer authenticity of the statement stunned Callista into silence for a moment. She looked at Odette, truly looked, and saw not a threat, but an ideological rival. Sawyer, however, saw an opportunity. He saw Quentin's apparent defeat and Callista's momentary discomfort. "You know what, Quentin?" Sawyer said, pulling out a thick wad of bills. "I feel bad for you. Here." He tossed a few $100 bills at Quentin's feet. Go buy your new friend something nice. Maybe a decent cup of coffee. Don't worry, it's a gift. My charity for the day." The money fluttered down near Quentin's worn-out sneakers. It was a calculated act of humiliation. Quentin felt a red haze of fury. This wasn't just an insult. It was an attempt to buy his dignity and insult Odette's pure heart. But before Quentin could move, Odette moved first. She bent down, picked up the money, and walked straight up to Sawyer Knight. She didn't drop it or throw it. She neatly folded the bills and pressed them into the breast pocket of his expensive blazer. "Sawyer?" she said, using his name with an icy clarity. "You clearly think you can buy respect, but the only thing you're buying right now is pity. Keep this for your next therapy session. You need it more than we do." She turned her back on them, linking her arm through Quentin's. "Come on, Quentin. Let's get that kale. I need to cook dinner." Quentin looked at her, stunned but filled with a profound sense of admiration. She was a fortress. She was everything he had been seeking. As they walked away, he heard Callista's high-pitched voice behind them. "You think you're so noble, Odette, but wait until his student loans start calling. He's a loser, and you're just going to drag him deeper." Quentin didn't turn back. He smiled. He knew with absolute certainty that he had won. He didn't need the penthouse, the cars, or the socialite wife. He had authenticity, resilience, and a partner who stood up for him when he couldn't fight back with his real weapon, his fortune. "You didn't have to do that," Quentin whispered to Odette. "Yes, I did," she replied firmly. "That kind of venom shouldn't go unchallenged. They're toxic, Quentin, and we're not." As they walked away, Sawyer, retrieving the cash from his pocket, looked at Callista. "Did you see that? Who the hell does she think she is?" Callista, her veneer cracking, felt a sudden sharp stab of something she hadn't felt in months. Doubt. She looked at the easy, intimate way Odette held Quentin's arm, the genuine warmth between them, and compared it to her own forced laughter and transactional connection with Sawyer. "She's poor, Sawyer," Callista scoffed, trying to regain her composure. "She just doesn't know she's poor yet." But even as she said it, the lie tasted hollow. She looked back at the couple disappearing into the market crowd, a strange knot forming in her stomach. She had dismissed Quentin's failure, but she couldn't dismiss the genuine happiness he now seemed to possess. The gilded cage Callista Drake had chosen was beginning to rust. Life with Sawyer Knight was less a honeymoon and more a relentless performance of wealth. He was possessive, prone to public fits of jealousy, and utterly boring unless he was discussing asset valuations or his own superiority. The expensive trips, the glittering jewels, the Bali resorts, they were all just tools for Sawyer to project his own status, demanding Callista act as the perfect, flawless accessory. He never listened to her, only expected her to listen to him. She missed the intellectual sparring with Quentin, the genuine excitement of his original chaotic success, and the subtle flattery of being desired by a man who was truly brilliant. Callista was sitting in her sprawling new apartment, leased by Sawyer, of course, not owned, when her phone buzzed with an alert from a news aggregator. It was an old-school piece about the bankruptcy of Cross Innovations, mentioning the fire sale of the old warehouse property near the industrial rail yard. The Seattle Daily reported that the land, which Sawyer Knight had publicly intended to purchase for a high-end nightclub, had been snapped up by a highly secretive entity named the Seattle Historical Archive Annex, linked to an obscure international infrastructure fund. A flicker of unease crossed Callista's perfect face. Sawyer had been livid about losing that property. He'd spent weeks trying to unmask the buyer, only to hit a dead end, convinced it was an old rival like the Van Derlin Group. But something about the extreme secrecy and the strange name Archive Annex felt personal. It was too quiet, too strategic for a known player. She picked up the phone and called Brielle Mercer, the divorce attorney. "Brielle?" Callista's voice was sharp, cutting through the usual pleasantries. "I need you to dig deeper into Quentin Cross. Specifically, I need every scrap of information on the asset he retained, the defunct intellectual property rights from Cross Innovations. You need to find out what Project Aegis was." Brielle, who had been quietly compiling her own file on Quentin, felt a professional shiver. "Callista, I already told you, the IP was valued at zero. It's legally distinct from the bankruptcy. We have the no contest clause. We can't pursue future earnings unless we can prove intentional concealment of an existing asset." "Then prove it," Callista demanded, her manicured nails drumming impatiently on the marble table. "That pauper I saw at the farmer's market? He wasn't scared. He was calm. The way he looked at that little library girl, Odette, was the way he used to look at his computer screen when he was about to make $1 billion. He has something. That warehouse, that annex, it's too close to his little studio. It smells like a front," Brielle conceded. "I'll instruct my team to issue subpoenas to the bankruptcy trustee regarding any unusual disbursements or transfers in the 6 months prior to the Chapter 11 filing, and I'll see what the name Vanguard Holdings yields, though I suspect the trail will be cold." Meanwhile, back in the small studio, the walls were literally vibrating with the secret. Quentin and Odette had moved their relationship from the library cafe to a comfortable, lived-in intimacy. The curtain separating the main room from the high-powered servers was usually drawn. But one evening, while Quentin was out picking up pizza, Odette was cleaning up their shared space. She noticed a thick, nondescript file folder tucked beneath the mattress of the pull-out couch. She was normally scrupulous about respecting his privacy, but the edge of the folder was jammed up against the wall, threatening to tear. She pulled it out gently. It was heavy, sealed in a plastic cover, and contained highly stylized architectural blueprints. The title, scrawled in faint pencil on the side, read, "Annex Refit, Secure Sub-Level 3. Odette frowned. "Annex? What annex?" She unfolded the top blueprint layer, which showed the schematic of the massive underground structure, complete with reinforced concrete walls, a proprietary cooling system, and a separate ultra-secure fiber optic routing chamber. This wasn't a blueprint for an apartment. It was a blueprint for a high-security vault, or a top-tier data center. A sticky note, accidentally left by Dane Fox, was affixed to the corner of the blueprint. Q, DoD rep confirmed site visit next week. Aegis 99.998% stability. Odette's mind raced. DoD? Aegis? These were not terms one associated with a struggling GED student volunteering at a public library. She thought back to the conversation at the farmer's market, to Callista's cruel taunts about debt and failure. She had defended Quentin fiercely, believing in his inherent goodness and his narrative of a spectacular business failure and humble rebirth. But these blueprints told a different story. They suggested an ongoing, massive, highly funded operation. The man she loved, the man who ate canned soup with her and worried about the price of kale, was concealing a reality that was orders of magnitude beyond the life he claimed to live. Quentin returned, the smell of pepperoni wafting through the cold air. He saw the blueprint file open on the table, and Odette standing over it, her expression shattered, her glasses slightly askew. The curtain had been pulled back on his performance. The moment of reckoning had arrived, not in a courtroom with his ex-wife, but in his tiny studio, with the one person whose trust he truly valued. "Odette," he began, dropping the pizza box onto the floor. "It's not what you think." "Isn't it?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. She didn't look angry. She looked profoundly hurt. "I don't know what I think, Quentin. I thought you were starting over. I thought you were working hard for a second chance. I thought you were authentic. But this?" She tapped the blueprint. "This is $1 billion lie. You're not trying to solve a stubborn equation for a high school diploma. You're building a fortress for a military contract. Who are you, Quentin? The failure or the phantom? Quentin walked towards her, his heart heavy with the fear of loss. He knew he couldn't lie anymore. He had built this new life on a foundation of truth, but he had topped it with a roof of necessary deception. The structural integrity of his entire existence was now resting on this moment. "Sit down," he said, taking her hand gently. Her hand was cold. "I need to tell you everything. But you have to believe me. This lie was never about deceiving you. It was about finding you." Quentin spent the next 4 hours, long after the pizza had gone cold, meticulously unwrapping the layers of the past year. He explained the failure of Cross Innovations, the part the world knew, which was a genuine, devastating $500 million debt that he still bore the legal liability for. Then, he revealed the calculated, almost surgical pivot, the creation of Vanguard Holdings, the sequestering of the quantum encryption IP, the strategic use of the bankruptcy filing as a firewall, and the execution of the no contest clause as the ultimate legal defense. He showed her the offshore balance sheet, the $108 million seed money, which had now swelled through initial contract milestones to over $250 million. He showed her the deed to the Archive Annex, now the subterranean testing facility for Project Aegis. "The failure was real," Quentin insisted, holding her gaze, "but the debt was for the company, which was bloated and fake. The intellectual property, Aegis, was always mine. Developed on my own time, with my own capital, entirely separate from the marital assets. Callista left me because she thought I had nothing but debt. I let her think that because it was the only way to get her out of my life permanently, without her trying to claim a stake in what I was truly building." Odette listened in stunned silence, piecing together the financial brilliance of the deception. It wasn't fraud. It was pure, cold strategy, a corporate escape plan disguised as a spectacular crash. "But why continue the lie with me?" Odette finally asked, the hurt still raw in her eyes. "Why the GED? Why the volunteer work?" Quentin reached out and touched the ceramic mug she had given him. "Because the last 5 years of my life were a performance. I was the product, the CEO, the celebrity. Everyone who came near me wanted something. Money, connections, status. Callista didn't love me. She loved the man in the headlines. When I met you, Odette, you saw a failure. You saw a guy struggling to make rent, and you brought me a sandwich. You saw my mind, not my wallet. You respected the struggle, not the success." He looked at her, his expression stripped bare. "I was terrified that if I told you the truth, that I was a multi-millionaire building a secretive, highly valuable defense firm, you would recoil. I needed to know that if you loved me, you loved Quentin, the guy in the threadbare sweater who talks about leveraging constraints. I needed authenticity in that studio apartment, the library, the pretense of poverty. That was my filter." Odette looked around the tiny, functional room, seeing it now not as a symbol of failure, but as a crucible for truth. She realized the depth of his isolation, the sheer weight of being loved conditionally. She wasn't angry at the money. She was hurt by the secrecy. "It worked, Quentin," she whispered, a faint smile forming. "I love the guy in the sweater. But how can we build a future if the foundation is built on silence? I can't be your secret." "Then we end the silence now," Quentin declared, a profound relief washing over him. "I need 1 more week. Aegis goes live next Friday. The DoD will make the announcement. When the world finds out Quentin Cross is back, I want you standing next to me, not as a trophy, but as my partner, the only person who saw the king when he was living like a pauper." Odette's heart soared, but her practical mind kicked in. "And Callista? Your lawyer, Brielle, is brilliant. If she thinks you concealed assets, she will come after you. That clause has to be truly watertight." "It is," Quentin assured her, pulling out the copy of the divorce decree. The IP was never marital property. The entity receiving the funds was created before the marriage legally ended. And more importantly, the no contest clause is absolute. Callista sacrificed future claims for immediate liquidation. Brielle can attack the structure, but the structure is flawless. The only thing they have to fight is my word, and that's exactly what Callista gave up. The following Friday, the world shattered. The Department of Defense held an unscheduled press conference announcing a groundbreaking billion-dollar contract with a previously unknown firm, Vanguard Holdings, for quantum cybersecurity. The accompanying press release mentioned the lead architect by name, Quentin Cross. The news hit the financial markets like a tsunami. Cross Innovations stock, worthless for months, surged momentarily before stabilizing. The major headlines, however, were entirely focused on the man who had vanished. The bankrupt king returns, Quentin Cross's secret billion-dollar pivot, screamed TechCrunch. Wife divorced tech failure days before 100 metlers reveal, taunted the Seattle Times. The shockwave was instantaneous and total. Sawyer Knight was in a client meeting when his associate frantically slid the news articles across the polished mahogany table. He read the headline, his face draining of color. Quentin Cross, Vanguard Holdings, billion-dollar contract. He had been publicly humiliating a man who was quietly orchestrating a massive, historic comeback, all while he, Sawyer, was celebrating buying a failed mogul's discarded wife. The shame was suffocating. His investment banker client, seeing his reaction, promptly ended the meeting, citing concerns about the stability of Knight's judgment. Callista Drake was poolside, scrolling through her Instagram feed, when her phone lit up with a furious call from Brielle Mercer. Callista answered, annoyed by the interruption. "Callista, turn on Bloomberg right now." Brielle's voice was high and frantic. "He didn't fail. He didn't just rebuild. He was never gone. He made us look like fools. He's worth hundreds of millions. He sold the IP that was worthless for a fortune." Callista stared at the turquoise water, her mind unable to process the words. Quentin? The pathetic man carrying grocery bags? The man she had ridiculed and humiliated? He was a phantom, an illusion of poverty, and she had gleefully signed the papers, the permanent, irrevocable, no-contest papers that guaranteed she would never see a cent of the true fortune. The real price of her freedom was about to be paid. The courtroom was packed, buzzing with reporters and curious onlookers. The hearing wasn't about the money. It was about the integrity of the divorce settlement. Brielle Mercer, standing next to a visibly distressed Callista, argued vehemently before the stern-faced Judge Holloway. "Your Honor, we contend that Mr. Cross engaged in fraudulent concealment of marital assets," Brielle asserted, gesturing dramatically toward Quentin, who sat calmly beside Dane Fox. The entity, Vanguard Holdings, was created solely to siphon off intellectual property, Project Aegis, that was developed during the marriage and was part of the community estate. Mr. Cross used the pretense of bankruptcy to trick his wife into signing away her rights to what is now a $250 million enterprise. Callista leaned forward, her face a mask of wounded entitlement. "He lied to me, Your Honor. He played poor. I was acting in good faith, believing I was freeing myself from his debt." Quentin stood up, dressed now in a perfectly tailored, simple charcoal suit. No flash, only quiet authority. The confidence of the man who knew he was absolutely right radiated from him. "Your Honor," Quentin began, his voice cutting through the courtroom's tension. "The arguments made by Ms. Drake's counsel are rooted in a fundamental misunderstanding of corporate law and, frankly, marital vows. Cross Innovations did, in fact, fail. The debt was real, and I legally took full responsibility for it. That was the marital estate that Ms. Drake was separating from." He paused, holding the judge's gaze. The asset, Project Aegis, was not owned by the failed company. It was private intellectual property, developed on my personal time, using private capital, and transferred to Vanguard, a separate entity, which was structured legally before the divorce was finalized, but crucially, received its valuation and massive payment after the divorce decree was signed. There was nothing to conceal at the time of the signing, but a possibility of future wealth, which every spouse risks losing when they divorce. Dane Fox handed a sealed document to the court clerk. Furthermore, Your Honor, we would draw the court's attention to Clause 4.b of the final, signed decree, which Mr. Cross insisted upon, the no contest clause. Ms. Drake explicitly waived all rights to future earnings, changes in circumstance, or future claims in exchange for immediate access to certain liquid assets. Quentin turned slightly to face Callista, his eyes cold and final. Ms. Drake didn't leave me because I was poor. She left me because I was a liability. She was given a choice between being a partner in a struggle or taking an immediate payout. She chose the payout and the social safety net of Mr. Sawyer Knight. She signed the papers to let me drown, Your Honor. She cannot now complain that the life raft she refused was actually a submarine. Judge Holloway examined the documents, then looked sternly at Callista. Ms. Drake, the law is clear. You were represented by counsel. You signed a binding agreement that specifically forfeits any claim to future earnings, regardless of how quickly those earnings materialized. Mr. Cross's structuring, while aggressive, appears legally sound and fully disclosed to your counsel via the Schedule A assets. There is no evidence of fraudulent concealment of an existing asset. You made a choice, and that choice is irrevocable. He slammed the gavel down. Motion denied. The divorce settlement stands. This court is adjourned. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Callista stumbled back, her eyes wide with the realization that she had thrown away hundreds of millions of dollars for a few years of shallow luxury with a man she didn't even like. She hadn't just divorced a poor man. She had divorced a ghost and lost an empire. Quentin, ignoring the flashing cameras and the stunned gasps, walked out of the courtroom. Waiting for him on the steps was Odette Hale. She wasn't dressed in a designer suit. She wore a sharp professional blazer, clearly purchased for the occasion, and her usual earnest glasses. She looked ready for a board meeting, not a public spectacle. "How do you feel?" she asked, her voice soft amidst the chaos. "Free," Quentin said, taking her hand and pulling her close. "And terrified. The real struggle starts now. The lie is gone. The press will hunt us. This life is not simple." Odette squeezed his hand, her simple act of fidelity worth more than all the money he had just protected. "I know, but this time we face the world as we are. The genius, the strategist, and the aspiring finance expert who knows that true wealth is not an asset, but a sustained connection. And I already passed my final exams, Quentin. I leveraged my constraints." She smiled, and the genuine, uncalculated warmth of it completely eclipsed the cold glitter of Callista's perfect jewelry. As they walked away, hand in hand, a reporter managed to shout a final question at Quentin. "Mr. Cross, is there a lesson in this for others?" Quentin paused, turning to face the cameras one last time, Odette by his side. "The lesson is simple," he said, his voice carrying clearly. "When you lose everything, pay close attention to what you keep. I kept my integrity, my talent, and my quiet life. That's where the real fortune was built. Never let anyone define your value by your balance sheet, and never confuse gold with true worth." The cameras flashed, capturing the image of the true couple, the billion-dollar strategist and the grounded woman, walking away from the noise, toward a future built on shared struggle, not inherited wealth. Sawyer Knight, already being publicly derided as the fool who caught the discarded wife, found his career tanking as investors questioned his business acumen. Callista was left alone, watching his downfall from a leased apartment, staring at the diamond cuff that suddenly felt heavy and hollow. She had traded a potential dynasty for temporary bragging rights, and discovered that once the money was gone, the love evaporated instantly, leaving her with the debt of her own shallow choices. Quentin Cross's journey is a powerful testament to the fact that true value often lies in what we hide from the world, not what we flaunt. Callista Drake believed she was securing her future by fleeing a perceived failure, unaware that she was abandoning a man who had already executed a masterful, multi-million-dollar pivot. Her attachment to status led her to reject resilience and authenticity, exchanging a future empire for a temporary toxic comfort. This is a story about the ultimate financial judo, using perceived weakness as a shield to build unstoppable strength. Quentin's secret fortune was not the money itself, but the chance to test his own character and find a partner in Odette Hale who loved the man, not the myth. He teaches us that the best investment is always in your own hidden potential and in the relationships that value your presence over your possessions. If this story of strategic comeback, raw drama, and finding genuine connection resonated with you, please like this video and share it with anyone who needs a reminder that setbacks can be setups for spectacular comebacks. Don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling true-life fiction that explores the depths of human ambition and the true meaning of wealth. Let us know in the comments. Would you have walked away from the money for the chance at real love?